The very best way to grow tomatoes, in my opinion, is what we call single stem pruning. And what that is we take an indeterminate tomato. It has to be an indeterminate tomato. Indeterminate just means that it will continue to grow all season long and put out tomatoes all season long until it's killed by either disease or a frost. Determinate, you'll hear the term determinate tomato. Determinate tomato means that the plant will get to a set height. It will put out all of its flowers and all of its tomatoes, and then it will die. So determinate means it gets to a determined height. Indeterminate means it continues to grow all season long. Because it continues to grow all season long, for me, the best way that I have found is to grow it single stem pruning, and I'm using an 8-foot stake here. This is an 8-foot post. We have it about 18 inches in the ground, so that gives this tomato 6.5 feet to go up. Now it'll actually get taller than that, as long as like blight doesn't take it out before it reaches that height, because I have a really long growing season here in southeastern North Carolina. So single stem pruning just means this: I'm gonna have a single main stem that I allow to go to flower and produce and set fruit. So we see that this is an Abe Lincoln tomato. I really like this variety. And you can see that we're already beginning to set little baby tomatoes along this. But what you can also see here is we need to pull out, this is a sucker. So if I allow this, and you'll know that this is a sucker because it is in between this joint here. So we call it an armpit. So if I allow this to continue to grow, it will produce an entire tomato plant. And we don't want that. We want to have one single main stem that the flowers come off of. We don't want this. If we allow this to grow, we will get more tomatoes that way, but they're going to be smaller, and we're not going to be able to do the single stem pruning, saving space in the garden. Tomatoes are space hogs. They will take up a ton of room. So to do this, the first thing I'm going to do is remove this sucker so that it doesn't have the ability to go into another tomato. Interestingly enough, if I wanted to, I could remove this sucker. I could put the bottom of it in a glass of water, and after a few days, maybe up to a week, I would see roots begin to form. At that point, I could theoretically plant this sucker out and get an entirely new tomato plant if I wanted to do that. Right now, I do not want to do that. I have enough tomato plants. I have a ton of volunteer tomatoes in my garden. So I'm going to come, really we should be using pruners or snips to do this, but I have scissors. I cannot find my garden shears. So I'm just going to cut this off right there. Get rid of it. Now, I'm taking, this is jute twine. So you could use tomato clips, you could use jute twine, something that's kind of got some give. And we don't want to tie it up too tight because we don't want to cut off, like we don't want to cut into the stem. But I'm going to just tie this up. You know what? That one's a little short. Let me get a longer one. So to stake this up, I'm going to take this jute twine and I'm just going to tie it to the post like so. Now this guy is getting a little big, right? We're going to go ahead and stake it up in another place a little bit higher up the plant. So you want to do this every I don't know, maybe 6 inches or so. And like I said, we're giving it some room because we want to be able to have the wind kind of come in and move it. Keep keep it nice and healthy, not too tight against the post. We have fruit beginning to set here, so we obviously don't want that too close. Maybe about right here. It's probably good. Give it a little room to give. Okay, and that's all you do. So we're just going to keep coming out here, removing any suckers. So let's see if we can find any more examples. I don't think there's any more examples on this one. Oh, right here. Aubrey, come up that way. So right here is another sucker beginning to form. We see it's in the elbow, right? It's in this joint. So here's the main stem. Here's the stem that's coming off, and right here is a sucker. If we leave this, it will develop into a whole nother plant. So we're gonna go ahead and pinch that off. Same thing here. See, joint, elbow, armpit, whatever you want to call it, and here's that sucker forming right there. So we're going to go ahead and pinch that guy off too, and we're going to leave these, and we're going to come back, and we're just going to do this all the way up the tomato. The other thing that's really important about single stem pruning is we want to get a ton of airflow. So I'm going to take off, and we want to kind of keep the bottom part of this plant away from the ground, because what'll happen is it'll get disease, it'll get, there's more pest pressure, so that the more we get it up off the ground, the healthier this tomato is going to be. So what's best is if we take off the bottom branches. So I'm going to take it all the way up to about here, and see we have plenty of room for airflow. We have a lot of space between the ground and the tomato, so if it rains and water's splashing down, we're not going to have splashback on the leaves. That will cause a lot of damage and disease. So this way we keep our plants really, really, really healthy. So this is actually an example of a determinate tomato. Like I was talking about earlier, determinate tomatoes get to a set height, they set all of their fruit, and they die. Sometimes with determinate tomatoes, we can have a couple flushes of fruit set before it dies off, but either way, it's only going to get so big. So in the case of a determinate tomato, we are not going to do a single stem pruning. If we were to do that, we wouldn't actually get any fruit. So for a determinate tomato, we're just going to allow that to pretty much go. The thing about determinate tomatoes, if we were going to prune them, the pruning that we would do would probably be this. We're actually going to do it right now because I want you to see. There's chicken feathers on my tomatoes. But if we were going to prune a determinate tomato, we're only going to prune what's on the very bottom. We don't want a lot of contact with the soil. We want a lot of space between the soil here and the first sets of leaves. So there's some little tiny leaves here. I'm going to either cut them off or pull them off. And I'm going to get some space between like I said, the first sets of leaves and the ground. But all of the rest of this, and see we're beginning, this is a cherry tomato, type of cherry tomato. So a small tomato variety. So we're going to allow this just to continue to grow. These are the only ones, determinate tomatoes or dwarf tomatoes are the only ones we're going to be able to use tomato cages for. If we try to use these for indeterminate tomatoes, there's just no point. It's not strong enough, it's not sturdy enough to be used for indeterminate tomatoes. But determinate tomatoes, it will work fine. Thanks again for hanging out with me in my garden today. I hope that your garden is filled with grace and that you're abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.